Hello and welcome to the 81st episode of In Our Defense. Hi Abhishek, how are you?
Hi Dave, how are you doing?
All well. Tracking the Israel war, I'm guessing, like all of us. It's now into its day 21.
We are
20.
reaching that stage where remembering the day is not easy now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Something that we have talked about earlier, that
Yeah.
it'll be 20 days, 30 days, 40 days. It's not something that's going to get over soon.
Yeah. But in this episode, I don't want to talk about Israel because we've spent the last two episodes talking about it.
And we put out a lot of details.
And nothing really much has changed on the ground as such.
It will not change, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be this the slow sort of incursion, whatever you want to call it, of Gaza. So we'll keep tracking it of what happens in Israel and Gaza. But so we'll come back to it when we have to. But this week I want to talk to you about something that I've always been meaning to talk to you about. Defense movies, sort of a light subject, but a subject that I find very interesting because I'm a big, apart from being a big defense, follower, I'm a big cinema fan. Love movies and especially love defense movies, and I've always felt that Indian cinema has lacked some really good war film or defense movie. Primarily because I'm guessing we've not been involved in the big scale wars, like the world wars, for example. I mean, we have been involved in the Second World War, but not as one of the leading
But we've
powers.
fought enough conflicts to
yes.
have micro stories of battles.
Yes.
And there are some which have been made well, some not so well. You'll have both kinds. But let's start with what's your favorite Indians as well as international.
Indian, I would
war
say
or conflict
it's
film.
Laksh.
Okay.
Yeah, and international, I would say Saving Private Ryan. I don't know if you watched it.
I have. I've watched both. Yeah.
How about
I
you?
quite like both of them. See, frankly, I feel that a war movie has to be really, really trash not to be liked. Dunkirk is a new one, not so new now, but I've actually missed
One of the
watching
recent
it.
ones, yeah.
I missed watching that. But what's your take? Should war movies be fictionalized? Should they be exactly what the narrative is? Are you comfortable with this sort of the factual position being tinkered with?
To an extent, yes, and that's actually one of the things we want to talk about when we always spoke about.
Yeah, because
it.
if the filmmakers are saying that this is fiction based on that, then they are well
Should be
within their
fine,
rights to.
That's the thing. I would always prefer and I would always want the filmmakers to be honest about it and not give out that impression that we are sort of making a documentary or giving you the exact details of what happened. So when it comes to war movies, if they more or less follow the arc of what happened, because when it comes to wars, you always have the victor who's writing the history, right? So you don't actually know what happened in that microsecond, in that moment, unless you've spoken to the people who were actually involved in that particular battle of a larger war. So I'm guessing filmmakers will definitely have to take some liberties to kind of portray those moments. So what I'm trying to get at is if the minor aspects are sort of fictionalized, I'm pretty much okay with it as long as the overall arc is kind of keeping with. So I mean, for example, if suddenly you have a movie that says Germany won the World War II, I mean that obviously would be unless it says it's a fantasy
it can't
movie.
go off to another level of cinematic licenses. I guess it has to stay around what the factual position was. Yeah.
But I do have issues, and this is the first thing I want to talk to you about. I do have issues with certain scenes or certain moments that are just over the top. To give an example, and the reason I thought of, by the way, talking about defense movies and Indian cinema is the recent release of the movie Tejas, starring Kangana Ranaut.
Since you told me that this is something that we are going to be talking about in our podcast, and I knew nothing about this particular
Tejas,
film, that's why I wrote and I specified that I know nothing about Tejas, the film.
Yes.
I know everything about Tejas,
The aircraft.
the LCA.
Yes.
But there's very little that I know about Tejas. In fact, I'm not exaggerating. I wasn't aware that this such a film has
I would
released.
not blame you for that because
Not that I don't like cinema.
yeah, but I would
do
not
like
blame you for
cinema.
that because I think that movie, to safely say, has been panned everywhere. I think almost
I
every
mean, the kind of
reviewer.
obituaries that have been written about it, I was thinking, why exactly do you want to talk about this? You and Anna both. Because it's...
No, I don't want to talk about the movie, especially because I haven't seen it. So I don't.
You
want
also
to,
haven't.
I haven't
Then
seen
what
it.
was
No.
the excitement?
I want to talk about defense films in general.
Okay, you thought that this gives us a peg,
yeah, a peg because,
to
you
sort
know,
of
yeah.
talk about
so
defense
that our
films.
listeners and readers.
So we should
watch-
tell our listeners and listeners and
viewers.
both of us have already. We haven't watched this
Haven't watched
particular
this,
film.
yes, yeah.
So don't roast us for it.
Yeah.
For giving our comments on a film that we haven't watched.
Which is why we will not comment on the film at all. I just
And
thought
is there any controversy around it? I don't think there is.
there is some. I won't say controversy, but I think
Except
there
the
is
fact that there's
some-
Kangana Ranaut
Yeah.
in the film.
But as a recent statement that she made, which is another thing I want to talk about, but now that you mentioned, we can talk about that in the first place. A recent statement she made yesterday, I think she did. She said that every nationalist should watch this movie.
Oh, okay.
And I find that problematic. I'm sorry. I'm just going to go out right there and say it. I don't know how and since when is it become okay to relate nationalism or patriotism
With a film.
with watching a particular film. I just don't get it. Even though, and I've asked the person on my team who reviewed the film.
Does it mean that people who don't watch it are not nationalists?
That's kind of, I'm guessing.
Is
what
that the
statement
inference?
means. Yes, that's the inference that I drew. And that's kind of problematic.
Yeah, so to promote a film, you are now using
Nationalism.
nationalism.
Just because the film has got something to do with the military. Even though the film, by the way, is what the person who watched the movie told me, has got absolutely no undertones of nationalism. It's about a woman who wants to become an Air Force officer.
But she is a fighter pilot.
Becomes an Air Force. She becomes an Air Force officer, a fighter pilot, and carries out missions. That's more or less it. It's mostly about a woman's dream of becoming an Air Force fighter pilot. That's more or less it. There's no sense
There is
of-
some mission or something, espionage.
There's some.
whatever I read
There's
in
some.
the-
There is Pakistan involved, obviously. Pakistan involved. I'm guessing that perhaps makes the film something that nationalists should watch. I don't know. But what the person who watched it told me, and this is the best bit, is that the film has a sequence where there is a plan. I'm not. Spoiler alert, by the way. If people do want to watch it, our listeners or viewers, I'm going to give a spoiler. Is what the person who told me as well. There is a plan, I don't know if it's executed or not, but there is a plan to fly the plane and land it on a Pakistani Air Force base and cover it with sheets so that it's transparent and they don't notice it over there.
So ideally you should just bomb the base.
Well, yeah.
That's what I've heard. That's what happens in
yeah,
wars.
yeah.
That the first targets are Air Force bases because
Yeah,
that sort of
that's always happened.
really jeopardizes a military's operations, not just fighter operations, but even logistically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Since I haven't watched it, I wouldn't be able to comment on it. But yeah, I mean, landing at another base is
And then covering the aircraft up so that they could not sense it landing. That's a bit weird. They don't have air traffic control.
I've
radars.
definitely heard of airfields being attacked and bombed and in
landing
nature, yeah.
in them. It's
Never
a bit,
heard of this.
yeah. See, that's what I meant about, over the top. And another example I give you, this is of a film I actually watched, and it's a film I actually enjoyed a lot. Uri, that was based on India's surgical strikes into Pakistan. Very well made movie, enjoyable, fun watch. But there was this part where they used this drone that looked and flew like an eagle. I actually, even though I follow defense like you, I actually had to Google to see if there's actually such a thing that exists. And that also harks back to what you said earlier about fictionalizing and maybe taking it a bit too far. Because stuff like this is actually what then... Because see, surgical strikes happened, that's a fact. The movie's based on it, that's a fact.
And when you're making a gripping film, you don't want any loose ends.
Yes, and I just thought that the whole eagle drone thing,
Wasn't required.
flying into the terrorist camp, sitting on the... perching on the window ledge... just like kind of off-putting.
Also, Uri, while the film is about the operation in across LOC, but it begins with the Myanmar,
Yes, Myanmar, yes.
which I thought was a
Good touch.
good, very. It gave you a sense of the kind of operations that special forces carry out. The spectrum of operations from the jungles of Northeast, in a very different terrain, a very different adversary to what happens at the LOC. So I like that the mention of the fact that such an operation was carried out uh, on the other side of your frontier.
So nice movie, but like I said, this one part kind of put me.
And there were certain political overtones
Yes,
as
there were,
well to the
there were.
current political scenario. But again, you can't blame filmmakers for it. They're well within their rights to have these kind of plots and subplots in a film.
Right. But since you mentioned the undertones, and what do you make of this? I think in the last few years, 3, 4, 5 years maybe, what we just briefly spoke about while talking about Tejas, the Kangana Ranaut movie, this constant linking of any movie to do with the defense forces, whether it's the Army, Air Force, or the Navy, to nationalism and patriotism, and that, if you do not like that movie, then you're basically an anti-national or not patriotic enough.
So are there any more examples like this? I mean, I don't know. Pardon
There
my
was a
ignorance.
controversy, a couple of, I forgot the name of the movie, but there was one. But anyway, what do you make of this trend that we are seeing of late?
I mean, I can't remember of something like this happening before Tejas, and this also you mentioned to me. When Uri happened, of course, there was, as I said, that there was a bit of this emotional, political connect to it, trying to send across a message, political message. But as I said, I mean, a bit of it can be you can give that leeway to the filmmakers. But yeah, to openly say that watch this film because this is nationalist is a bit of a problem. Kashmir Files, I think,
Kashmir
got into
Files
a
got
little bit
into
of controversy because of that. Because again, I have not watched that film, but during the screening of Kashmir Files, there was this incident in a Noida theatre where people were chanting Jai Shri Ram. So there's no connection, and unnecessarily it can lead to a law and order issue. The kind of narrative that was being built around it, in all means, make a film which is based on things that have happened. There's nothing wrong with it. But having said that, Kashmir Files wasn't a war film.
Wasn't a war film, of course, yeah.
But of a story of a conflict zone.
Of a conflict
That's
zone,
why we are
and to do
mentioning
with the state
it.
that
That's why
that is
we are
relevant to
mentioning
national
it, yeah.
security of India. So that since you asked about historical accuracies or just like fact versus fiction, etc., I just recalled another movie that came out recently, Gunjan Saxena, about once again about about a woman who wants to join the Air Force, and there was a bit of a controversy, I think mostly from some veterans, about how the male officers were portrayed and their attitude towards newly recruited women cadets. Do you recall this, and did you have a chance to talk to anyone within the
No,
forces
I mean,
about that?
women being treated in a manner that has been portrayed in that film has been a topic of discussion. I mean, I don't know why anybody was sort of shocked to see that happen, and it was kind of a biopic. And if Gunjan Saxena felt that this is what she's gone through, that's what she feels. I mean, how can somebody else come out and say that no, this doesn't happen? It becomes very difficult for anybody else to comment on what somebody has gone through. If somebody is saying I've gone through this, so it's either the person's word or your word. But I mean, simply if there are my life experiences and I have to pen them down or say it anywhere, you might not agree with me that you might say that this is not the general norm, but it happened with me. So the deniability can only come from me. So yeah, there was a bit of a controversy about it, that women officers are not treated this way in the Air Force, and there was a sense amongst many that it's been exaggerated and it's over the top and things like that. So that's for Gunjan Saxena to answer, frankly.
Yeah.
That
And this is actually this is a kind of a throwback to our episode with special guest Preeti Chaudhary, one of our colleagues, where I think we briefly touched upon this, that there is a lot of resistance to accept the fact that for a while the military setup, which was completely filled with men, was resistant to the idea of women being inducted into the forces, and perhaps the film tried to portray that, and maybe some felt it was.
See, that's what I'm saying. Cinema even though I don't watch it so much now, but I've watched a lot before. In fact, my master's dissertation was about cinema and was about conflict.
Really?
Something that I ended up
Wow.
being monitoring closely and being sort of completely involved in conflict and terror and things like that as a journalist. So my master's thesis was about how conflict and terrorism is represented in cinema.
That is.
So
You should have told us that
it
before.
is a topic very close to my heart, and I can go on and on about it. And that's why maybe we can sort of diversify it a little and talk about conflict and military and wars in cinema. A lot many times these kind of films will be very controversial. I don't know if you remember a film called Machis in the 90s. It was in
I've
Punjab,
heard about
Punjab
it. I
terrorism.
haven't
Punjab
watched it. I haven't
terrorism.
watched it.
It created a lot of controversy. But the fact that film was released, that in itself showed that at that point of time there was quite a high level of liberty, I would say, that filmmakers had. I don't see that kind of movie going through the scrutiny in today's date, because again it was not a factual film. It was a fictional movie, but the setting was, of course, what was happening in Punjab, and it was quite dark. And in a way, it did raise very serious questions on the functioning of the state, on the functioning of the police, especially these anti-terror units, how they picked up guys. And that's what the film was about, and it was quite hard-hitting. And in the end, the film actually shows news clippings of officers who were facing trial, who got convicted because of fake killings and things like that. So it sort of justified the making, saying that what we are showing you is not over the top. These kind of things have happened, and the Indian courts have dealt with it. The Indian system has dealt with it. So that was a very strong film on conflict or terror, security, which I kind of liked. And since we're talking war movies, I asked you your favorite films, and of course they were much newer than the ones that I have liked.
You want me to say why? I think for obvious reasons.
You're free to.
I'm younger.
No, but you're not that younger that these, because the films that I'm talking about, I was nowhere near being born as well. So
True.
yeah, maybe there was more access to those kind of
That
films
true. Could be, yeah.
at that point of time, and frankly, not very good Indian war movies have been made, if you ask me.
That was gonna be
even
my
though
largest point of view,
there's a war like 71, which hasn't had a movie made on it. I don't know why. So my Indian war movie favorite by there's no choice. It has to be Hakikat.
Okay. I haven't watched it.
It's the 65 war. It's the 62 war with China, and the story is Rizangla. What happened in Ladakh. That's the story.
Yeah.
And not only is the film made well, it portrays the story of Rizangla to what I had known. The scenes in the film are what have been written in books. And the story of those 120 brave men of 13 Kumaon, 110 died out of 120, taking on over 1,000 Chinese soldiers. There's a scene in Hakikat where the Indian soldiers are dead, virtually frozen, their weapons in their hands,
Wow.
fingers on the trigger. Very hard hitting.
Wow.
And why it's so relevant, if people haven't watched it, they should go and watch it, including you, because we keep talking about Ladakh so much. So it's a film that's quite relevant in today's date, because it will give you an insight. It will give you a sense of what is happening right now. Exactly that's what happened back in 62 that led to the war.
Wow. Interesting.
Exactly the same things. And the Battle of Rizangla is a famous battle.
Yes.
Major Shaitan Singh, again, his story has to be read by people who haven't. He was the one who was leading the Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon. The battalion was at Chushul, another place that you've heard so much over the last 3-4 years. And this company was forward deployed at Rizangla, where this battle was fought in November, 18,000 feet, freezing temperatures. Dharmen plays the main character, although he's not a major in the film. He's a captain.
Okay.
I don't know for what reason, but yeah, I mean, I remember this, and it's a film that probably one of the earlier films that I've seen as a child, and I've watched it many times after that. And another one is set in made in the 50s, Second World War, The Bridge on the River Kwai. These two are my favorites, and again that film so hard hitting. Prisoners of war in Japanese captivity somewhere in Burma, now Myanmar, during the Second World War. And the leadership of that CEO, of the British CEO, that comes out in that film. It's the kind of stuff that legends are made of. And they make a bridge for the Japanese. That's what their task is while they are POWs. And the bridge that they make, they end up being so involved in it because the CEO feels that this is a service that they are doing, for mankind. You're making a bridge during war, which the enemy will use for their benefits. It's a rail bridge, but it will be used for time to come by the citizens, by people there. And the film, by the time it ends, it's the British Army who's trying to bring that bridge down. And these British soldiers are trying to save it. Stark irony. So, yeah, I mean, these are my two favorite. But there have been so many films that come here and there. And the ones that you mentioned that have come recently, Uri, I quite liked it, yeah. Gunjan Saxena, frankly, I didn't like the movie that much. It wasn't that well made, personally, I felt.
This is actually, the larger theme, the larger feel that I have when it comes to this topic is that, Indian cinema does not really have some really good, hard-hitting movies on conflict or war. 71 You is a good example that you
And there's so many characters. I mean, imagine a character like Manik Shaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a single biopic.
Though we should do mention that a movie on Manik Shaw is coming out.
It's coming up, okay.
Vicky Kaushal is going to play Manik Shaw in that. It's called Sam Bahadur. It's coming out very
Good
soon.
choice of actor, I must say.
Yeah, definitely. But, I read a tweet some months ago by one of the veteran retired officers that the reason Indian cinema probably does not have a good catalogue of war movies is because the Ministry of Defense has historically been very closed.
Yeah. I mean, our military history is quite shrouded with
secrecy.
I mean, there's no doubt.
And they're not very approachable. Is that a fact?
No, it is. Yeah.
Why is that the case?
That had been the case, but I mean, now you can see these newer films coming up, and that's why I say that some of them have these political overtones, because probably the government wants such films to be made, including Uri, for that matter, but not to take it away from the filmmakers and from the artists in Uri. But yeah, I did feel that there were parts of Uri where some political messaging was happening.
Of course, definitely there was, but what I liked about the movie was that when you see the actual operation, it's quite close to what you have been describing.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
the fact that the trek back was the toughest for them, and that was the one they were most fearful about, and you that was actually shown in the film. How at the planning stage of how they were really worried about how to pull those men out once the
And usually
strike
you
was
see
completed.
such films are about your grand victories. And that's why, again, mentioning Hakikat, it wasn't a film about victory. It was a film about a military loss. Still, you had the courage to make a film on a war that you lost, I think is incredible. Because I feel it's quite insulting not to honor or not to make films on those brave soldiers who've been part of battles that they lost.
Of course.
Even if they lost, just look at the odds they were against.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong in celebrating valor, even if it ended up in a defeat.
Yeah.
It requires character
Yeah.
of another level.
Which is actually why I like Laksh, because even though the final scene of the movie is, of course, a grand Indian victory with the flag flying on the point that they were trying to capture, but the middle part of the movie actually deals with the heavy losses they suffered during the first assault they made on the point. I'm not sure how closely it resembles to any of the battles that was fought during Kargil, though there's been talk that the character of Hrithik Roshan was inspired by Captain Vikram Batra, which also led to another movie called Sher Shah.
Sher Shah was
recently.
his biopic.
Was a biopic, exactly.
But Laksh, I would like to say that it was purely fiction.
Purely fiction,
in the
because,
backdrop of Kargil.
Yeah.
But that character was sort of
Inspired sort of by
was
Vikram
it?
Batra. That's
Okay.
what people have written
No, but
about.
what I know about Vikram Batra is that he wanted to be an army officer, but in Laksh,
It's
sort
kind of
shown
the,
that the guy
yeah,
is.
yeah. So that's why the inspiration probably was about the final assault, like
Okay,
when he ensures that he's the one who leads his team to victory. Even though Vikram Batra sadly lost his life during the Kargil conflict, and in this case, Hrithik Roshan survives. But that is the part I did like. That added some sort of realism to it, and that is the part I also liked about a lot of foreign war movies. It's not a movie. This is a series. I don't know if you watched it by HBO, Band of Brothers. I think one of the finest depictions of World War. Of a war, because, and this is my personal choice, but. I like when you can see the human side, the human suffering of everybody, because even a soldier suffers during a war. And I think the problem with a lot of Indian war movies is the constant celebration of what's happening. You don't really get to see always the suffering that also comes along with it. We should definitely celebrate our victories, but I've always felt that was missing. What do you have to say on that?
I don't know. I'm not sure because Indians are quite melodramatic, and our cinema has a lot of melodrama.
True, that is true.
And it does show a film like Border, let's say. It has more melodrama about their personal life than it actually exists, and that's because as a race we like it.
It has melodrama of the war itself. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but that scene where Sunil Shetty picks up a tank mine, walks next to a tank, and places it behind it, that was a bit much for me again. I mean, to think that the Pakistani tank commander did not have a pistol. First of all, picking up a tank mine and yes, walking next to the tank while it's reversing.
No, I'm talking about the human side of it. So all those characters, there is a fair bit of their personal life.
Yes.
And what their families feel, and in fact, I don't know what Major Chandpuri would have felt when he saw that scene where Tabu, who plays his wife, calls up her father, who's well connected, and says that don't let him go to the war. So I really feel sorry for Major Chandpuri's wife.
Yeah.
So that is cinematic license, isn't it? And I'm sure they shared the script with them, saying that these are the things, and I'm sure there was an assent of the family, because that's quite, I mean, insulting in a way, for a soldier's wife to be shown in such poor light. But yeah, that's cinema for you. And by the way, the two characters of Sunil Shetty and Akshay Khanna, they don't die.
Yeah.
In the real Battle of Longewar,
Yeah,
they did not
don't
die.
Yeah. In this
But
one
in the
they did.
film, it's shown that they die. So again, a bit of playing with facts, which is okay. I mean, because it was fictionalized a bit. But yeah, that was a good battle.
Yes.
Great story.
Great story
to tell.
But I think, Border for many is a cult classic, but I think it could have been told much, much better. And I think there's an opportunity, like you said.
Of course,
so 71 War has,
71 War has some great
great stories.
So does 62. And I don't know why a repeat of Battle of Rezangla hasn't been done till date.
Yeah.
It just baffles me,
Definitely
and especially now that it's so much in context, as I mentioned, that it's so similar. That we've discussed China so many times, and I'm sure I would have said this, that whatever has happened now in the last 3-4 years, the plot is so similar to what happened, to what led to 62, between 1959 to 1962, and something exactly the same has been happening.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know if some filmmaker that's why I say that it's good to have a sense of history if you want to make good cinema, and a good sense of current day context. It's sorry for the cliche, sitting duck film to be made. A modern day remake of Battle of Razangla.
I hope someone's
Somebody's
listening to
us,
us and taking inspiration.
And you can talk to us. Talk to me if you want.
Talk to Abhishek, definitely. Yeah.
To give you the context of what happened,
And what's happening now?
which hasn't really come out
Yes.
over the years. So I'm willing to sort of counsel you on that.
And be like a historian for the project.
Why not?
Just take a quick break before we continue.
Since 1945, a total of 36 United Nations Security Council draft resolutions related to Israel-Palestine have been vetoed by one of the 5 permanent members.
Yeah.
Either it is Russia, US, China,
It will
UK or
always be.
France. Out of these, 34 were vetoed by the US and 2 by Russia and China. So all the vetoes were used by the United States of America primarily to protect Israel. The US has vetoed resolutions on Israel a total of 46 times, including over Israel's invasion of southern Lebanon, as well as Israel's annexation of the Syrian Golan Heights.
Yeah.
Now, with this, you can see that, and the 1972 draft resolution, the only time US did not veto was brief and generic, calling upon all sides to cease immediately all military operations. Now, you can see with this that there is a consistent manner in which the Security Council is used
Yes, precisely.
to the interest of either party.
Yeah.
And the Israel-Palestine conflict can never be resolved if you have a Security Council that is so skewed with veto powers.
Yeah.
You have Russia, China that will continue now
Yeah.
to support Palestine and veto any US move. And then you have US vetoing every resolution that has ever come to the Security Council. And if it is passed in the Security Council, it will become binding. The right to exist for Israel cannot mean that the extreme elimination of Palestinians. If they have a right to exist, Palestinians already existed on that land.
Yeah.
They were given a part of that land and they've taken a lot more. I'm not saying what is right and what is wrong over here. What I'm just trying to say, Anna, is this, that your United Nations has failed to deliver on a solution that should have been given or brought about long ago.
Yeah.
That if you created a state out of a land that was not theirs, how is it that Palestine still has not been accorded statehood? And the United Nations, in all its might, girth, the body that it is, the weight that it carries, or it shows that it does, has not managed to just bring to stop a lot of these cases and instances of violence perpetrated by certain powers.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Abhishek and I are discussing defense movies, war movies, movies on conflict, especially with the focus on Indian cinema, and how I feel that Indian cinema hasn't really done justice to a lot of material that's readily available. Abhishek was just referring to the 1962 war with China and the Battle of Razangla, that he feels hasn't really been explored very well. 71, the war is another example. 71, I think, actually has enough material for a series.
It's a gold mine.
Because it is you have the political aspect of it in Delhi, where you have the decision to basically bifurcate a country. You have the character of Sam Manekshaw.
Yeah, the character of Indira Gandhi.
Indira Gandhi, yes. The army chief who, it's been mythologized now that he famously refused his prime minister. That really did not happen, by the way, to our
No, he did.
He refused in a polite way.
He said, "I'm not ready."
It's
a
that's
matter
what
of
he said.
record,
Yeah. But the accounts of it are very that he was like, ki I am the boss and I will not do it. Even if
He
you
said
refuse
that
it.
I'm not ready
Give advice
at this
that-
point of time. And if we enter in now,
We will lose.
This was February, March of 71.
Because the monsoon was coming up and
so he was, in fact, social media is all over the place. You have Sam Manekshaw himself talking about it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Explaining why he said
the sober
no.
part of it was kind of lost for a brief period in between, is what I meant. Because some of the account that came out
So
was
they
very
prepared
graphically.
almost all year. and it was in the end of 1971, November, December is when India started operations in East Pakistan. Now
Just imagine you have the entire year of material to like how the army prepared and how there was also sort of a covert operation in Bangladesh.
There's no film again on the Mukti Bahini.
Mukti Bahini, exactly, yeah.
How India was sort of played a crucial role in it. What a fascinating watch it would be.
I think you should, after some point, think about branching out into this area and
I'm not a filmmaker.
you can write a script, not a script, but you can write like sort of a material that can be turned into a movie.
Maybe.
Because I seriously feel Indian cinema lacks it, and one of the reasons, like we mentioned before the break, is the historical aversion of the government and the Ministry of Defense to kind of engage with filmmakers, etc. And also, you said like the record keeping itself is not really up to the mark, to the levels.
Like
you'll
there was
see
a
in the
film
West.
on Kargil as well, LOC.
Yes, LOC Kargil by G.P. Datta, yes.
Now, a lot of accounts are quite relatable. I'll tell you why. Because it was a compilation of news reports.
Oh.
The film.
Wow.
Most of the stories that you see, you already read it in newspapers. It doesn't have a deeper insight.
Because they don't have access to the actual.
So it felt as if a film has been made by what you read.
Already know about, basically. Yeah.
And because you maybe again, and LOC Kargil, they tried to keep it quite factual is the sense that I got. That they wanted to just show exactly what that battle was about. And in that, the access was only news reports. So it feels that you are watching those news reports on TV.
Yeah. So I think that's a good example. I mean, that's a good example of an attempt being made to make a good use of a lot of material, but not having access to actual good material. Just like what you had in press, and that was perhaps the reason that film didn't really do as well. I've seen the movie. I didn't really enjoy it a lot, even though like you said, there were parts of it that were enjoyable and relatable. Had a star cast.
Huge star cast.
I mean, I don't know how old I was, and I was like, oh my God, so many people in one movie. That's even possible.
And frankly, technically it was quite good.
Yes.
To have shot like that, and you actually felt that you are in a military location where a conflict is happening. So in those terms, I loved it. Real rounds being fired and things like that. And I have been to these places. So I did feel later on in my life when I went there that it was quite real in terms of the locales and things like that, locations, the forward deployments, the movement of convoys. So that way, technically, it was shot very well. All that was fine, but there were places where you thought that there's no deeper insight into. You already knew this. It was good for somebody who doesn't know it. And also it tried to cover the entire battle, sort of a khichdi. Whereas there were so many smaller stories of Kargil. All those characters is a story in itself.
Yes.
All those guys. And the list is long. So it just touched upon all those characters. But if somebody were to make, like Sher Shah is one of the biopics that has been made on Vikram Batra. Just imagine all these characters.
So many.
So many of them. And all of them young officers.
I think that's what Band of Brothers did, right? Instead of making one movie, Spielberg, who was one of the makers,
sort of make a series
out of it, and
and
just
go into the details
of
those characters.
Of those characters, yes.
And also, as you said, humanizing it. Who, again in Kargil, we were discussing, with every story, they did try to humanize, they did try to give their personal life a bit. But khichdi ho gaya na. Kitna kar loge?
Even though it was a very long movie.
And that's why it was a
more
long
than 3
film.
hours.
That's why it was a
But
long
even then, it was too less. Let's come...
Going back in history, it just popped up in my mind. Going back in history, there's one very good film on 1857, perhaps the first war of independence, which is called Junoon.
Okay.
I
know Mangal Pandey, but...
A Flight of Pigeons is a novel. So the film is based on that. Again, I recommend. Decent star cast, Nasiruddin Shah, Shashi Kapoor. Old film, really well made. And again, the story of brave men who lose.
Nice.
Similar to what Hakikat did. Junoon. Brilliantly made film. And yeah, I mean, it's good that it just struck me because that was the first war of independence, isn't it? And for a film to have been made on it is good. And not many know of this.
I didn't know of it. Yeah, I love
It wasn't that big commercial film, even though it had actors like Shashi Kapoor, who was a commercial big star. Again, the film, the cinematography was amazing. When horses are running, those kind of scenes, and very, very close to reality.
I love how this episode is turning out to be a nice set of recommendations for me, at least, of movies to watch. So thank you for that.
There's just a few that pop up when you're discussing these things.
Yeah. There's also one, I think, I haven't seen it obviously, but one that has Devanand and is, I think, of the 65 war, if I'm not wrong, or 62.
Okay, I don't remember.
Can't recall. Okay. Right. Let's move a bit to a slightly different genre of movies, but also to do with defense and national security. And these are everyone's favorites, spy movies. Whether international, national, international or Indian, first of all, can you tell us, do spy agencies really send agents flying into countries with arms, ammunition, and kidnapping people and flying them back off, or just like bumping people off in different countries? Stuff
They
like
do
that.
something. That's why they are spy agencies. What they do, we don't know. It'll always be in the realm of secrecy and speculation.
Because I think on this one genre, I think you can just say that almost all cinema industries have tended to
of course.
just go over the top with stuff like this. And even though there have been some good spy movies that have been quite real. Munich is one example. I don't know if you've seen it. It is based on the Israeli operation Wrath of God.
I like The Spy. It was on
The Spy was a fantastic series, yes. And also, again, based on true events of how an Israeli ended up becoming the deputy prime defense minister of Syria, yes, and who was hanged.
Imagine.
Imagine.
And he comes in guise of being an Argentinian businessman.
Yes.
Trying to find his roots in Syria or something like that. That was weird. And it's short. It's 7-8 episodes. Not very long.
There's also one, I don't know if you've seen it, in which Gary Oldman is the main character, called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Okay. It's based on a novel by John le Carre, one of the finest spy novelists, I think, who's ever written. So you should watch it. It's very, very well. It's about it's just right after the World War II, with Germany being divided, and it's about a spy who goes in and tries to get one of his people back from East Germany. It's a very good movie.
A lot of these fun films with Salman have been made. Akshay Kumar have been made.
Yeah, and also there's a movie by Akshay Kumar in which they portrayed the Indian rescue of civilians from a war zone. How accurate, by the way, do you think was that to reality? Even though not really defense, but still.
I think it was a bit of it was obviously fictionalized. But yeah, I mean, we've all have read there were several Indians stranded and how they were gotten back. Something similar to what happened in Ukraine. Lots of Indian students especially. So if one is to make a film someday on that, I'm sure that will be an interesting film in a war zone. Not a war movie per se, but a film in a war zone where there were so many young Indians, a lot of Indian interest, students who had to be brought back. So I mean, that was about the Gulf War?
Yes, the Gulf War, yes. Yeah. You mentioned the Battle of Rezangla, we talked about 71. Any other, historical conflict or war that you think deserves a movie? Could be international as well, but hasn't really gotten one, but really has like a lot of money.
That's what I'm saying. One needn't... It's actually difficult to make a film on the entire war. It's about those subplots,
yes.
Which are more... And it's easier to relate to because it's one story then. Because wars are such a big political event in history. It becomes so difficult to bring in everything in that. So, for example, if one is to make a film on 1971 war, it will be an epic.
Yes.
If you want to put everything together. And perhaps that's the reason why it's not been made.
Possible.
And that's why Border was made. Because it didn't get into all of that.
Yes.
It just stuck to one battle. and a battle that against all odds. The storytelling is easy. 120 men against an entire armored regiment walking in. The Indian Air Force coming in, giving air support, waiting all night. It's just that story which is so strong. And this is what wars have. They have these smaller stories which are so fascinating. And I think there's so many films that can be made on these small battles, small operations that Indian forces have carried out in the Northeast, in Jammu and Kashmir. You mentioned Uri. If you ask me, there have been several Uris.
Yes.
And there have been stories that can be turned around into a film so easily. You talked about human spirit. These films are all about human spirit. I don't think anybody is watching it. Of course, you get to learn something that you might not know. But that's not the primary objective of such films. I mean, you're not making a documentary. It's not a history book that will give you all details, all specifics. It's telling you a story. Obviously, it will have history. And filmmakers are conscious of the fact that they can't go wrong with that history. As you, in the beginning, you mentioned, you can't be terribly wrong. You might ignore certain facts, but you can't say that Kargil was the battle of that Kargil happened in Ladakh.
Yeah.
So you can't be saying that.
Yeah.
So it's like that. But I think the kind of stories of human spirit that we have in our forces, for some reason, haven't been shown on cinema that much.
Yeah, I know. As we end this, that's to just like extend that point of yours. I think the large reason for that also is perhaps no active government or military support to such endeavors, because there's a nice historical fact that a lot of people don't know, that during the World War II, the US government sent around 5 or 6 directors to different battle zones, asking them to make movies as a means of propaganda, to use those movies.
Information warfare.
Yeah. No, not information warfare. To use those movies back home as propaganda movies to get more people to enlist into the forces. And I'm guessing that kind of spiraled into the obsession that Hollywood then had with wars. But then it's again what I said at the beginning of this episode.
There's this recent film on this Amir Khan film, which was a remake of Forrest Gump.
Oh yes, I forgot the name.
I don't remember the name now. Lal Singh Chaddha.
Yes.
That also got into a lot of controversy. That why have they portrayed an Indian soldier as somebody who's not stable or something like that. Yeah. I thought it was quite needless for that controversy, because it's a piece of fiction. It's not showing anything else. And I actually haven't watched the film properly. I've just seen it in bits and pieces. It comes across as a fun movie. Doesn't come across as a war movie. It's not a war movie. It's not a war movie. War happens.
Yes.
It's the story of this guy.
Yeah. It is about the guy. It's not about the soldier. It's about the guy. It's about the character.
It's just because somebody is wearing a uniform in a film, I don't think there is any need to get unnecessarily riled up about the way that character has been shown, because that character is the brainchild of the filmmaker or the person who's written the character.
And do you see, so what I was talking about earlier, do you see this changing in the near future? Because, a lot of the foreign movies or foreign shows that we talked about, Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, etc., a lot of the directors, a lot of the filmmakers in those projects had close interactions with the respective militaries, not necessarily to get the actual historical record per se, but to ensure that the films look as realistic as possible. I don't know if such collaboration has happened in India, and if it hasn't, then do you see that happening? I mean,
it's happened. See, LOC Kargil, there was a lot of collaboration. Otherwise, a film of that scale wasn't really possible without the Indian military sort of helping them with logistics, with the basic facts of what had happened. And as I said, it was quite realistic. Now there is a big change in mindset. They're quite open to filmmakers approaching them, and because every now and then there's something or the other happening on these lines, and you'll see more films being made in years to come. You can
then
you
it's a
can
good time.
remember this, that you'll see more films of this kind coming out.
Good opportunity for you as well then. I wasn't kidding when I said earlier you should think of. You should seriously, because the way you've talked about this on this episode right now, I really think you can do that.
No, as I said, that this is a subject actually I'm quite passionate about.
Yeah, because that was your
Cinema
dissertation.
and conflict,
yes,
yeah,
and
so
you wrote a paper on this. I mean,
Not a paper, it was a full dissertation.
dissertation on this, yeah. So, but yeah, good point you made, because I think the fact that Sam Bahadur is coming out, I'm pretty sure. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure there must be some collaboration involved.
There's
to
a
get his life story out.
there's a Bangladeshi officer. I've interviewed him. I've done his story as well. His story is any day the easiest pick for an OTT series. A deserter from the Pakistani army, who belonged to East Pakistan, enters India, is kept with raw for some days in Delhi, shares a lot of information, gets into East Pakistan, helps the Indian army and the Mukti Bahini. He got one of the Padma Awards a couple of years back.
Wow.
India has openly acknowledged his contribution.
Wow.
He was a lieutenant colonel, then in the Bangladesh army, and a young lieutenant in the Pakistani
when he
army.
deserted it.
I interviewed him, and he told me his story that how he was ill-treated. Despite being in the Pakistani army, he was ill-treated because he's a Bengali.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, I deserted my own army.
Wow. That
What a
would
story.
make for a fantastic show or a movie.
Yeah. And that story is there on the India Today website.
Yeah.
Still.
So again, if anyone's listening,
Maybe you guys can put out a link of that.
we will
And
be
the
able-
interview is also there.
Yeah. Right. Let's end it there. Let's end it on this note. My wish and my desire to see more Indian cinema on our wars and conflicts, because like we discussed during this episode, there's so much material to cover. And like you said, with the change in mindset in the military, within the setup, perhaps, and he's saying this will definitely happen. So we shall wait, and I'm very hopeful to see some nice movies in the near future. Thanks a lot, Abhishek.
Thanks, Adrian.
Great chat. It's like completely different from what we normally do. I don't think we've had such a light, fun topic, especially on a podcast like this since we began this podcast. So hope you had fun, and hope our listeners and viewers had fun. Thanks a lot. Thanks to our listeners and viewers as well. And a reminder, as always, you can subscribe to our WhatsApp channel. That way, it's very easy for you to stay updated to the latest episode of In Our Defense or any of the different podcasts that we have on India Today Podcasts. The number for our WhatsApp is 8588 966 996. You can also use that number to send us a message and let us know what you thought of this episode. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Anna Priyadarshini. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with the passport. Bye-bye.